Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to my second channel. This is where I upload kind of casual update videos about what I'm working on and what is coming in the world of Engine Simulator. Right before I sat down and started recording this video, I was actually working on the script for the next video that's going to be going on my main channel. It's a bit of behind the scenes here. Pretty much every video I make has a script that looks like this, and this is more or less word for word what I end up saying in the actual video. It's always a bit of a challenge to write these scripts because I actually have to go back and figure out what I did and make that into a cohesive video, which is easier said than done in a lot of cases because I work on a lot of different projects and it's not necessarily, one specific thing that would work in a video concept. Anyway, I'm going to be talking mostly about the simulation loop that I talked about last week. I think that there's a lot of interesting technical details there and a lot of optimizations that went into it that you guys might be interested in. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's go to the actual update for today. So we're going to be looking at Steam Engine Simulator again. I'm here in Visual Studio. So we are going to start the game, and we'll take a look at what has changed. It's not really that obvious when you look at it in isolation, but I'll show you what it looks like compared to the previous version. So I'll just take a screenshot here, and we'll go over into Illustrator. And as you can see, it's really not that different. It's just the color is a little bit deeper and there is a very subtle gradient on the sides, whereas before it was a completely flat color. Some people were worried that the shaders looked a little bit too extreme. I think I chose some bad examples because I was just initially testing it out. But yeah, it's a very subtle change. It's not really anything that crazy. Probably most people won't even notice. The whites have also been turned down very slightly because I felt like the contrast in the old version was a little bit too extreme, kind of hard on the eyes. You can maybe see it here in the direct comparison. The other change, which I feel like some people might take issue with, I'm actually not sure, is the removal of the infinite blue void. It's been replaced with something that I think is a little bit more professional. We just have this empty void here and a very subtle glow effect around the main game area. There was never really anything that intentional about having the void be the same color as the game area. It's mostly, I just didn't really intend for people to go out there in the first place. You have to remember, if you watch the original Steam Engine Simulator video, I made this program in 5 days, and I wasn't really paying very close attention to, making it into a polished product, so that was something that I just didn't really care about. Now, my main reason for changing it now is I spent a lot of time studying streamers playing Steam Engine Simulator, and some people on YouTube have made videos about it. And I tried to identify what was making the game look less aesthetically pleasing in the recordings. And I found that by having the void be the same color, it was kind of distracting from what you're supposed to be looking at. It kind of just makes this huge wall of blue. And I wasn't really a big fan of it anymore. I think that this is definitely an improvement, but as I've come to realize, people get used to something and then are a little bit resistant to change after that point, which is understandable. But I think that this is going to be a positive change in the long run. It just makes the game overall look a lot more professional. One of the main things that I talked about last time was this pause menu. Now, not much has changed about the pause menu. It's more or less the same as it was last time, but what has changed is this button here. So it used to be called Change Mode, and the idea was that you'd go and you click this button, and then that would change which DLC you are currently in. So hypothetically in the future, we might have more DLCs, but right now you can only choose between the base game mode and the power generation DLC. Now, I thought this was maybe thinking a little bit too small, or maybe a little bit too restrictive for where I want this game to go. So I decided that it would be good to invest a little bit of time and make, finally, an actual main menu for the game. Now, it's not really your traditional main menu because the game does not boot up into the main menu, but instead just boots up directly into the game. The main menu is kind of an extension of the pause menu. So if I click on it, it takes us into this interface here, which I'm pretty proud of. I think it turned out all right, given the amount of time that I put into it. So here's where the player would choose what particular game they are going to be playing within Steam Engine Simulator. And this kind of leads me into my idea here, or my vision for the future of this game, which is that it is no longer just a minigame with a Steam engine, which was kind of the original intention. I'm trying to retain the simplicity of the original game, but branch off into something that is a lot more. In this case, almost a simulation gaming platform. Maybe not that extreme, but similar to that. Over time, we can add more and more DLCs. Obviously, I'm not going to be developing any of these anytime soon, but definitely in the future, or we might even bring in some third-party developers to develop additional DLCs for Steam Engine Simulator, and they'll be visible here on the main screen. So right now, there's obviously only two. We have the base game, and we have the Power Generation DLC. And by clicking this button, it will actually start the DLC. And if we go back to the current game mode, which is listed here as the active game mode, and press resume, it'll just take us back to the game that we were already playing. All of these links work exactly like they did before, but now they've been moved away from the main screen, which I thought they were kind of cluttering things a little bit, taking away from the aesthetic of the game, and now they've been put into somewhere where I think is a little bit more appropriate. Alright, so we can return to the game here, and I will show you what I think is probably the more exciting thing that I wanted to show you today, which is the brand new particle system. The particle system that is currently in Steam Engine Simulator is very similar, almost identical to the one that I put together in the initial 5 days that I developed this program. It was always something that I felt was not that good, and I've always been wanting to replace it, I just didn't really have the time to do it. At this point, since I'm planning to sell some products within this game, I don't think that it's really acceptable to release it with the smoke and particle system in its current state, so that's why I changed it. I think this is a dramatic improvement. It also makes sense because when people think of Steam engines, one of the first things that comes to their mind is probably going to be the iconic clouds of steam, which was kind of missing in the previous version of the game. I'll show you a clip of what the previous particle system looked like, and then we'll take a look at what has been implemented now. So if I slide this slider here, this is what controls the alpha channel. So it'll basically make our particle effect more opaque, so we can actually see it. It'll make it thicker, so to speak. So this would be as thick as it possibly goes. This is basically completely opaque. And we can see, you know, that there's definitely quite a few differences compared to the old version. This is obviously extreme. So these parameters here, by the way, in case it wasn't obvious, these are just debug sliders. These are not going to be in the final game. I just use these to fine-tune the various parameters for whatever it is that I'm working on at any given time. I'm not sure what settings exactly I want for the particle system, but I'll figure that out later. For now, I'll just show you like what all these parameters do, so you can kind of see what's been implemented here. So the first parameter on the left, source F, these kind of have weird names. It's not really too important. This is the amount of force that the velocity at each of these outlets actually contributes to the motion of the steam particles. So if I increase this, you can see that it generally increases the velocity and the reach of the particle system. And if I reduce it all the way, then we basically have no velocity coming out of the outlet, which obviously looks very strange. The next parameter is, how do I explain this? It's how much the strength of the force field falls off with distance. So if I reduce this, you can see that the particles continue traveling for longer distances because the force field is just falling off more slowly, which again looks very strange. You wouldn't really expect this to happen. So you want to keep this value probably at around 70%. The next parameter is probably the most important one, and it controls how many particles we can actually spawn into our system. Now the reason why this is important is because I wanted to design this particle system so that it could work on a wide range of computers, but more importantly, I want it to actually look good when you turn the graphics settings down lower. So right now, I'm running at about 450 frames per second. It's a little bit lower than usual because I have my screen capture software on. And we can see here that I have about 800 particles visible, which is quite a lot. There's a lot of technical issues with drawing this many particles. You have things like overdraw and things like that. Basically, it's more expensive than it might seem to draw particle systems like this, even though it's just a 2D context. The fact that it's 2D doesn't really even make that much of a difference. In fact, this is not even a 2D game. It is technically 3D, But that's like a whole other story. Anyway, so by reducing this, we can reduce the total number of particles, and you can see that I'm down at like 250 particles now, and it hasn't really changed the appearance of the particle system that much. But it has doubled my frame rate. And I spent a lot of time designing this particle system carefully so that it would look more or less the same even as you reduce the total number of particles available for the system to draw to. So I can reduce this all the way down to maybe 5%, and you can see that you can start to see the individual particles, but it's still not even really that bad, and I'm up to 12 or 1500 frames per second at this point. And if your PC is really struggling, you can just turn this off completely, and now I'm back up to 2000 to 2500 frames per second. The next parameter, which is maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for some of the future DLCs that we have, is this wind parameter. So as its name implies, it applies a wind force field to our particle system. And you can see that it's kind of blowing my, my particles left and right, depending on whichever way the wind is blowing at that particular instant. I think I have it right now to kind of randomly switch directions. There isn't really a rhyme or reason to it. It's probably not going to be used very heavily in the base game or even in the DLC, but I think it could be interesting. I have some ideas for future DLCs where this could be more applicable. The final parameters are pretty straightforward. Basically, we have this drag parameter, which I guess it restricts the movement of the particles through the air. It's kind of like air resistance, I guess. So if we reduce that, you can see that the particles fly pretty far, pretty unrealistically. So we'd probably want to keep that at around this range. Now the chaos parameter is kind of interesting. Also, as its name implies, it just introduces chaos and a little bit of randomness into the system so it doesn't look as uniform, which can create kind of interesting effects, like with the whistle especially. Now, this is another parameter. It's very sensitive. I don't think I'd want it to be too much higher than like 10%, but something like this. And the final parameter is pretty straightforward. It just controls, it's kind of like a vertical lift force to make our particles drift upwards into the atmosphere. Probably the final version of this particle effect that I'm going to have in the game is not going to have the alpha set this high because it obviously, like, I can't even see this gauge anymore, which is a bit of a problem. I'm not sure exactly where I want to set it to, and I might even have this as a parameter that the user can control. I don't want to have the user control too many things because then at that point they're kind of just doing the development work that I'm supposed to be doing, and I just want the player to have the best experience just as the game comes. This new particle effect also works in the other mode of the game, the hidden mode of the game. So I can activate this quickly, and it really does give you an indication of how much more violent this particular mode of the game is. I think this will further indicate to people, the differences between the two modes. I think it also looks very cool in this aesthetic. The smoke actually translates reasonably well. And I think I might also add a little bit more chaos to this version just to further enhance that feeling of, things being completely out of control and being in this strange environment. All right, that's pretty much all I had for this video. The Steam Engine Simulator platform is pretty much ready for release now and should be live right after my next video release, which is going to be around the end of this month. And then shortly after that, the DLC is going to be releasing, and that's going to have its own video, which is also going to be on the main channel. I have many, many hours of footage and content for that video, and basically you're going to see kind of a documentary all the way from the beginning of the development, which was quite a few months ago now, all the way to the present day, and hopefully we'll get some numbers from actual sales on Steam, but I'm not 100% sure. It depends on how the schedule lines up. To all my Patreon supporters, thanks for supporting the project and making this all possible. It really would not be possible whatsoever without your contributions. And to everyone watching this video, thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully, this channel fills in some of the gaps in between the uploads on my main channel and kind of gives you some updates about what I'm working on. If you have any suggestions, ideas, or just something else that you want to see in my next video, just let me know in the comments, and I will try to take them into consideration next time I sit down and make one of these weekly videos. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. See ya.